So we are meeting to get our second Polish-Lithuanian, sorry, too many international contexts. Lithuanian-Ukrainian meeting. I can follow Polish-Ukrainian as well, so sorry for that. So we have a second Lithuanian-Ukrainian meeting. Last year we met almost a year ago in a similar, with a similar team. We were discussing and comparing Lithuanian and Ukrainian views on the situation, what is going on in Ukraine and around Ukraine. So we have decided that it's useful to do the same this year as well. So we will, as you know, the war, or the third stage of the Russian-Ukrainian war, with the third stage of the Russian-Ukrainian war. So we have, again, a year has passed already, and we'll try to talk what we've seen, what we see, how we see the situation. So we have Dr. Olena Polovko from Taras Shevchenko National University. We have Professor Iaroslav Teleshun from Taras Shevchenko National University as well. Later, Yevhen Mahda will join us, and from the Lithuanian side, we have Associate Professor Deividas Šlekys. We'll have later on joining us Associate Professor Laurynas Junavičius, and I will be moderating this discussion, Mariusz Antonowicz. We also should have had Emilia Indrashute, but unfortunately she's ill, so I will cover also as a participant for her as well. So let's maybe just start with Deividas, who will present us the situation, how he sees on the front line. He is our military expert at our Institute of International Relations and Political Science. So again, from 5 to 10 minutes, Deividas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Actually, yeah, I have more or less 30 minutes. Sorry for that. I will have a meeting with students after 6. So, but I think we will manage to discuss it. Okay, my idea is to maybe show how we see in Lithuania and maybe what we hear from our allies concerning, let's say, war fighting situation in Ukraine. One thing probably which comes actually clear message: everybody awaits Ukrainian counteroffensive. That it's supposed to happen. There's a lot of speculations what will be the directions, what will be the targets, but essentially everybody is waiting for that. And the reason, sometimes quite obvious, Western countries provided a lot of weaponry, sometimes with, I would say, political difficulties in domestic politics, like Germany. So when they gave you, it seems sometimes that what they promised not necessarily delivered or still delivering to Ukraine, but essentially the point is we gave you weapons, show what you can do with that. So I guess the President Zelensky is getting a lot of pressure from Western capitals. Let's say that you have to show, let's say, something with weapons which we provided. Is it enough weapons? Well, that's a question that will be open question. How much is enough? How many tanks or planes or air defense systems? But essentially, everybody waits that counteroffensive. Everybody understands that it must happen, at least, let's say, for our leaders in Western countries to explain our people. Let's say, look, we provide the weapons. Ukrainians tried, succeeded. Question is how much, how big success will be, but that must upcoming. So when it will happen, that depends on entire Ukrainian planning and procedures, but that's the hope and we're waiting from our capitals. How successful Ukrainian side will be, there's a lot of debates and in Lithuania and outside Lithuania that, again, it depends how much we will give to Ukrainian side in weaponry, ammunition, because what we know already that the Ukrainian side has more than enough imagination to construct the offensive plan and to execute it. But the point is, no matter how much smart or creative you are, if you don't have enough means, that will be a challenge, let's say, to keep a pace for longer duration. So that's that's where, let's say, debate is how much Ukraine will take over. And the impression which I get from many readings and debates that with what Ukraine have now, it will be impossible, say, to take back all Donetsk or maybe Crimea. That means the war fighting on the ground will be only, it won't end the war. Let's say this land campaign, counteroffensive, will be not enough, let's say, on military terms to finish off Russian military. Let's say that means it will be another phase, which will be successful. Ukraine will grab back or take back, sorry, part of its lost land, but it will be kind of, you take maybe land corridor from, let's say, around Berdansk or Melitopol, and let's say cut off mainland Russia from Crimea, and then let's say you need again rebuild your capabilities for another show. And that's what signals coming sometimes from Western capitals, that question mark how much Western countries is not like willing, but still capable to provide equipment, let's say, for another round in thinking about next year. We have situation, I would say, in Western countries with military procurement and production. Not enough factories building up tanks or ammunition, or still lacking far behind, let's say, in what we need, what we promised the Ukrainian side, what we need for our own capabilities. So the question is how long Western countries can provide the same level of support, not because that the political will is going down, but more, let's say, from material side, how long. So that's where the challenges are. And I would say the best way for Ukrainian side to win the argument is to be successful as possible on the battleground. That will be the best argument, let's say, going to Paris, Berlin, or London. Let's say, look, we managed, we're successful, but we need more, let's say, for another round. And that's what happened actually with Kharkov counter-offensive. Everybody saw, let's say, that Ukraine is capable to fight. That means, okay, let's give another round of support in equipment. Mariusz mentioned, let's say, how we see this leak situation. From what is in the media, probably the biggest question is that how much it will affect Ukrainian counteroffensive planning, because it's very, I will agree with that assessment that this leak is about information which is 1 month or maybe a bit older. That means it's very operational. It's very hot in freshness. That means if there is some ideas how Ukrainian side was planning, or if there is, say, the real data about some weaknesses on Ukrainian side, that will mean that the planned counteroffensive must be delayed because you have to revise everything. Because its question mark is what else is known for on the Russian side, what was also revealed, or what might be revealed, let's say, in the coming days. My own position is that these leaks are authentic. It's not, let's say, some global American disinformation campaign, let's say, to deception to make a deception for the Russian side. I think it's a too big game for Americans to play, that to convince everybody around the world, let's say, that they know what they know, and actually later on will be known as a deception. No, I think it's authentic leak, which creates a lot of problems for operational planning. And that's different from Snowden or WikiLeaks, because these leaks was about events which happened 5-6 years ago. This leak is about planning and discussions which were happening actually a month or 2 ago. So it's very hot in this sense, fresh. So because of that, I will be surprised that Ukrainian side will, will have counteroffensive in upcoming months or months. I think it will be pushed into more late summer, early fall. Well, that's my assessment, is guessing basically, but we waiting for your attack. We think that Ukrainian side is more than capable to plan this kind of attack, but we understand that not all the promises which was provided by Western capitals is delivered. You don't have all equipment which was promised. It's still coming. And that's also delaying your execution of the plan, which also now was delayed by this leak in info domain. which creates obstacles. And I think there is some level now about, well, not distrust between Kiev and Washington, because your leadership questioning to see what we can give to Americans won't they be leaked outside, let's say, closed doors. So there's some kind of, what I understand, mistrust between the capitals, what you can share, what you cannot share, which is, well, problematic. So I don't know, Mariusz, I think maybe we may have some 10-15 minutes discussion of questions, how we see, or how Ukrainian side is seeing, let's say, this counteroffensive question and leak question.
Okay, so thank you. So I maybe, if I may, turn to Dr. Olena Polovko, if I pronounce it correct. So if you could explain the situation a little bit, what is happening in the Ukrainian society, because we hear two things. We hear obviously that their resilience is strong to fight, but on the other hand, this war is affecting society, and that there's no fatigue is also quite hard to say. It's hard to deny that as well.
Thank you so much for questions. I think it's like just a little different problem for discuss, like about society is about like military aspect of this war. And first of all, I would like to apologize for my English. It's like, despite for challenge for me, I'm going. I have decided to not to miss the any opportunity to speak with my colleagues. And okay, we have these questions about like current situation in Ukrainian society, and what extent or if Ukraine is running out of resource. This is questions about the material and about the human resources. And the current war with protracted long natural is depleting the resource of the both sides. And of course, without the Western military and economic support from the West country, yes, our resources would run out. But as for me, paradoxically, Ukrainian resources lie less in external support than in internal resources. And these resources, it's about of social organization. At the beginning of the war, the society organized itself. After consolidated with the state power, and during this war, it's adapted to the war's condition. And we talk about what it's Ukraine, and for now too, demonstrated the impact of horizontal networks and reforms, and the principle of decentralization have become of like a recipe of Ukrainian ability and Ukrainian resources, self-organization, self-defense, self-renewal as a resources formula, from civil defense to the voluntaries to the diplomatic or academic initiatives. But I would like to note what Ukrainian civilian society demonstrated their incredible speed of adaptations to a very difficult situation. And we demonstrated what these horizontal networks can do best as the as we call centralization or hierarchical system. But this social network, social organization resources depends of or connect with the human resources. And now I must say what we are losing that to a great extent now. it's firstly and foremost, it's about our soldiers, it's about military resources. And also, if we were speaking now about society, it's about millions of refugees people, especially women, especially children, and it's about the demographical resources, what we could be lost. And if I search and have like result about some social research about this one, and the mood the people, those who gone, seems to be more pessimistic about future and about the returning for Ukraine than those who are in Ukraine now, because I think people in Ukraine is adopted, is like attended to the situation. And also, I must say about this, that the Russian is less sensitive to lose about its human resources. And for Ukrainian is a big and the difficult problem. And big and difficult problem in social discourse too. Not only this topic, but this also. And as now I work with the Luxembourg University, and we doing some research about educational system and about the difficult of the learning, difficult learning from students during this war, and we have some result. And I don't want to use this word, but we can like say about catastrophical, okay, maybe not catastrophical, but near decline of knowledge level after several years of pandemic and the year of the war. And if Maria remark say about the loose generation because of First World War, we are in danger of losing this generation too, because not only of war, because of the also of educational conditions. And it's again the questions of the human resources. And okay, we have problem with military, with economical, with natural resources, but is more valuable is the human resources. And now it must be problem from educational system to the military system for us. Sorry, I'm very nervous, really, so much, especially because of my English level. But thank you, and like it's some of my thought about this. And maybe you have some questions, and maybe I can clearly expect what I want to say.
Well, I mean, no one is native speaker as far as I understand.
Yes, I know, but
so
my level
everything is fine here. So does anyone have want to react to what Deividas and Olena said just a few moments ago?
Yevhen, do you want to add something?
No, I have not. I think that Olena is right.
Yeah, maybe from my perspective, if we're talking about demographical resource, I can totally agree that it's a great problem for Ukraine with the human resource in general, and even more, yeah, because Olena focused first of all in educational field and on army military space that we have loses each day. But frankly speaking, we have a great problem with migration and etc. For different estimation, more than 14 million of people left Ukraine. And of course, it's very tremendous. 2 weeks ago, I saw the final results of the Ministry of Economy that they show that 25 or 30% of people don't have jobs in Ukraine. And it's also a dramatic and crucial problem. And even more, I was shocked when I looked through and saw that this 25-30% estimates as 3 million of people. And I understood that 3 million of people whether it's 25%, it means that there are near 12 million of people who are from 18 till 60 years. We are talking about a person who works, who are not so young, who are not studying in a school, and we are talking people who are not go for their rest after 60. And of course, when we're talking about Ukrainian case, 12 million for such big states, it's a very small number. Of course, we believe and hope that a great amount of people will return to Ukraine after the war. But as different survey shows, at least half of them stay there. And even more, I saw some results for this moment that only a third part of these people will return to Ukraine, because till this moment they get work, they get jobs, flats, houses, and etc. They are more socialized in that society. So as a result, there are no need for them to return for Ukraine, because we perfectly understand that after the war is the first challenge, but not least. Friendly speaking, you know, nowadays in Ukraine expert circles, there are always a formula that Ukraine nowadays have two main challenges and two main tasks. First of all is to win the war, and second one to win the peace. And perspectively, to win the peace can be more difficult, because in this case we need effective public policy, good cooperation between state authorities and CSOs and etc. So of course human resources, I think it's the most difficult way, because when we're talking about military technique or different finance resources, is that helps that we can get it from our partners, from Europe, from North America, and etc. And when we're talking about human, in that case, we cannot get this help from another state at all. No one will send the soldiers, no one sends people to work in Ukraine. Of course, when we talk about human resource, we also mean expertise. Nowadays, a great problem with it in Ukraine, and I think it's a separate question that we can discuss. Maybe a small also remark for Deividas' question about leakage in Washington, devoted with this information. It's very difficult to make analysis what is going on in this process, because we understand perfectly that leak not always a result of I don't know activities of our enemies or opponents. Sometimes it's an instrument that can be used to create a barrier of information for an opponent. So when we're talking about this leak, it's very difficult to imagine what is going on. But I believe that nowadays, it seems today, our prime minister said that we'll have counterattack not on spring, while, like you mentioned it, like Ukrainian and our partners waiting for it, but it will be on summer. So, of course, it's very difficult nowadays to predict and to estimate how this leak will influence on political process in Ukraine and in military capacity in Ukraine too. Thanks.
Just while we have Deividas, just to add, we're talking about depleting Ukrainian resources, but if you can, do you see that the Russian resources are also depleting, because there are two sides in this case as well?
But Russia not so
Please,
sensitive to the human resources as Ukraine. It's a big problem.
Okay.
Mariusz, if I may, let's say a few episodes also. So about this counteroffensive and now let's say all the speeches, spring, summer. So it's a big deception game happening. I basically, what Ukrainian side is saying, let's say when they will be attacking, let's say I'm not believing, because let's say you're playing deception game too. Let's say you will never say, let's say, okay, Russian side prepare for attack in July. Well, you never know when it will happen. So it's big deception game is happening. The fact is, at some point, everybody understands Ukrainian side will have to show some kind of more movement on the battlefield because of everything what you got from Western countries. When it happens, spring, summer, fall, that's more operational discussion, but basically at some point you have to at least try and to show, let's say, that you're doing something, but not, let's say, fighting this attritional war, like on Bakhmut area, which also relates to what all of you said about resources. One of the messages, it's difficult to talk even in Lithuania, for example, let's say that we're providing help, let's say, but the question always is, how much resilience still Ukrainian side have, let's say, how much willpower to fight back you have? Yes, you have, but what about the people? How much people you have, let's say, for the armed forces, for example? So it's a very sensitive question, let's say, in our countries to talk, because if you start talking about, let's say, that Ukrainian side is losing a lot of soldiers, let's say it will be difficult to replace them, you kind of start sounding like defeatists. Yes, let's say that, well, it seems that Ukraine will lose. No, it won't be losing, but let's say we have to be more realistic in this sense. Let's say that Ukrainian side also has challenges replacing lost soldiers. And the longer war will be continuing, the more difficulties it will create. And that's why Western capitals, especially I think Washington, Americans are saying that maybe Ukrainian side is not, how to say, keeping safe some reserves. Are they sending them to Bakhmut? Because if you're losing your well-trained soldiers in Bakhmut, who will be fighting, let's say, in September, October? How are you balancing your, let's say, long and short-term, basically, objectives? So this worry, I would say, indirectly or between the lines coming from Western capitals about the Ukrainian side capabilities to find soldiers for the future fights, it's becoming more stronger. And I think, but it's always difficult to talk about it. As I said, it's not to sound and say that that's it. Ukrainian side will lose long term because they don't have enough soldiers. I disagree with that perspective, but I think we have to be more realistic in discussing, let's say, about what is happening in Ukraine concerning society, not will to fight, but more, let's say, how many people you still have who can fight. And if, let's say, what we can do from Western capitals to help you, let's say, maybe to find more people to fight, or maybe discuss about some options coming from Western countries, how we could, let's say, supplement your diminishing reserves of manpower.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll maybe turn now to Dr. Yevhen Mahda, if I may, if he could extrapolate a little bit. How is this situation playing out in Ukrainian politics? Because here in Lithuania and many Western capitals, we see basically Zelensky and his administration. We even rarely see his prime minister or Ukraine's prime minister, right? So are those, I don't know, tensions, issues playing out also in Ukrainian politics? And if so, in what way?
If I may, sorry, Yevhen, I have to go, so sorry for my short discussion, but I hope, let's say, it was fruitful or insightful, and I wish you have a good conversation. Sorry, but students are waiting, so I hope, let's say, we'll have another chance to meet, at least online. Have a nice meeting. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. I think at first that today Ukraine lives in unusual conditions for itself, because we now live in war, but live in democratic system. In time of World War I or World War II, Ukraine have not our state, but have totalitarian political regime in Russian Empire or in Soviet Union. Now we have a first big war in our contemporary history. And I think that it's our independence war. It's a hybrid situation, the independence war after 30 years of independence. But we live in hybrid reality with full-scale war on our territory. Russian-Ukrainian war is the biggest war in Europe after 1945 and the biggest war in the world in 21st century. Millions of Ukrainians live in the paradigm of Second World War with historical memory about it. Peoples like me, who is older 40 years, who can see, who can listen Soviet propaganda about Великая Отечественная, Soviet-German war, like a part of World War II. And in our contemporary society, we have millions of pensioners who remember a Soviet propaganda on this area. We have problem with statelessness, but I know that Lithuania and other countries of Baltic Black Sea region had similar problems. In our region, there are not states without problem with continuous state times. In Poland, the three divides of Poland. In Baltic state events of 1940, but with short independence times in Baltic countries is I think very big value for our Baltic friends, because it's a basic for independence after crash of USSR. It's another paradox that invasion of Russian troops stops the decline of Zelensky rating. And today, Zelensky is the most popular politician in Ukraine, but we have not a clear politician process. Because on February 24 last year, Poroshenko announced that he supported Zelensky and he declared stop of competition with Zelensky. And we have not today electional race to parliament or presidential election race, because today we don't know when we have elections in Ukraine. We understand only the fact that elections possible after end of war and short or longer transitional period. I think that it must be longer than 6 months, because the problems, the number of victims in Ukraine is very big, and we have a big problem with sociological field. I cannot trust to any sociological issue, because in Ukraine are millions of refugees in many European countries, in North America and other sides of world. I think that it's very interesting that Ukraine is a country of transitional democracy. And now we have more than 300 political parties registered in Ukraine, but more than 80% of these parties are only briefcase with papers. They have not members, they have not political activity. But in our law today, we have for next elections, we have open party lists. And it's I think that it's impossible because it may be first elections on this procedure, and many Ukrainians cannot understand the process of choosing of candidates, and many our citizens cannot understand that our politicians want to say after war. At the end of February, the Victory Coalition was formed in Verkhovna Rada, and it's a coalition in number of constitutional majority, but I cannot see its effective activity. Maybe my colleagues see this process better, but in our process, it's one international fact that Verkhovna Rada sabotaging the decision to the TV translation of its work. I think that it's unique because every parliament in every countries want to be maybe political showmen, maybe political activists, but our parliament today is very close, and it's not only about our Verkhovna Rada, it's about our government. I think that our Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, as well as most members of the government, are known for many citizens of Ukraine. Only 30% of citizens know something about Shmyhal. It's a shadow prime minister because the center of decision, center of policy making today in president office, and many peoples in political class in analytics think that the head of president office, like Andriy Yermak, like a vice-president of Ukraine, or more effective manager, state manager in Ukraine. It's a very interesting situation in with heads of ministries of our defense problems. For example, the head of our secret service, Ivan Bakanov, was dismissed in summer of last year. The Minister of Internal Affairs, Denis Monastyrsky, died in a plane crash in January of this year, and the Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov, embroiled in corruption scandals. it's a bright problem for our resistance, but this problem on high of system of political management is not actually for Ukrainian soldiers and officers. I think that many analytics, many politicians in West were surprised after first weeks of full-scale aggression of Russia, because the resistance of Ukraine was very strong and successful. And I think that Ukraine create a possibility of our statehood in fighting with strongest and biggest enemy. And it's I think that it's a big challenge in the contemporary world. In Ukrainian society, there is an informal consensus to minimize criticism for government, but minimize of criticism is not ability to stop all criticism. Today, society, Ukrainian society, does not know that there can be no election before the end of activity on Russian-Ukrainian battlefield. And in conditions of war, it is not even possible to change a constitution. For example, in Article 10 of Ukrainian Constitution, state guarantees the promotion of a development of Russian language. But in times of war, the procedure for changes is impossible. Critical thinking in Ukraine is very weak, but its development can undermine Ukrainian state propaganda. We have state propaganda, but the Russian propaganda is strongest, and my point of view that fakes are cheapest mass destruction weapon, and Russia used this weapon very active. And in final of my speech, I think that it's important for us. Ukraine today completing the process of becoming a political nation. It's maybe latest process in Ukrainian, maybe in Belarusian and Moldovan nation, we have a similar process, but without war. And the Russian-Ukrainian war should become catalysts of this process.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I will, as I said, step in for Emilia because she's sending her regards, but she has caught a cold and she's barely able to speak. Now, regarding maybe extrapolating on what Deividas said on the processes that are happening in Western Europe. So there was an interview with the Czech president of the Czech Republic, Petr Pavel, in Rzeczpospolita, in a Polish newspaper, which was also, how to say, in a shortened version republished also in Lithuania in LRT, where he basically said that Ukraine has one shot, right? What you know, for what Davis has said, right? So to make a good counteroffensive, if it is successful, similar to what we saw in Kharkiv, right? So then we'll be able to push more. But I think there are two other aspects to have in mind as well, is that we are approaching election period in top 3 of Ukraine's supporters when it comes to military, in terms of military assistance. So we have an election period approaching in the United States, the election of the president. We have a general election approaching in a little bit more than 1 year's time in the United Kingdom, and we're also having an election approaching this autumn in Poland as well. So, and if you have elections in contemporary democratic societies, you have depolarization, which is also deepened by social media, by the repercussions of the pandemic. We also are still dealing with the rise of populism as well in many Western societies, and as a result of the polarization of that particular polarization, you have very often, and we also seen that as well in Lithuania, where people start to deny that, you know, Crimea belongs to Ukraine, not because they believe so, but because their opponent says so, right? It's the logic of polarization, and this might also complicate this military and financial assistance when it comes to Ukraine as well. And again, it's a paradoxical situation, because as I've seen, it's not a real person, it's Jan Smugarov for Klub Jagiellonski, that if you compare Western support for Ukraine and Western support for Afghanistan or Iraq, so it has been one of the most efficient military assistance that the world has seen for a very, very long time. It was, you know, dollars, euros, very, very well spent. So here, so this is one complication. We have election season approaching, which means more chaos, more decision making, more decision making, and more, how to say, constraints when it comes to decision making. Now, obviously, this might lead to a not as coherent unity when it comes to that Western broad alliance. I'm very, how to say, cautious to call it Western, because we have South Korea, we have Taiwan, we have Japan, we have Australia, and so it's hard to say, it's hard to call it Western. However, there is an issue. It's not all that bad, one thing, because on the one hand, and again, and let's say division is not that bad at the moment. In what way? Because we had a lot of discussion, lots of, let's say, sometimes outrage, sometimes scandals related to Macron's visit to China. However, if you look at it in another way, right? So the Chinese, as far as I understand, they had this ambition and they had this hope that maybe Europe will not be as hawkish, right, when it comes to China as the Biden administration is. And I believe, and some extent, this is some that China watchers are repeating, that this might work as some kind of break for China, right? In terms of supplying heavy weaponry to Russia, right? So that if we move in supporting Russia full scale, then the Europeans will become as hawkish as the Biden administration, right? So this is a kind of unexpected movement of, let's say, flow of events, which shows that this disunity can have some positivity. Now, another big fact when it comes to the Western alliances, and this will be a big break, no matter who, I would say, who is in power, right, is the arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin and that woman who is responsible for the deportation of Ukrainian children, right? So
Maria Lvova-Belova.
Belova, yes. So this really, really restricts anybody's ability to negotiate with Vladimir Putin, no matter who comes to the White House, no matter who comes to Westminster no matter who is the chief of the European Commission, because as again, remember, we're approaching the election season in Europe as well, possibly a new head of the European Commission, new head of the European Council, the new parliament, a new European Parliament. But that indictment really closes options when it comes to negotiating with Putin, and probably only a new set of Russian administration would be able, it would be possible with a new set of Russian administration. Otherwise, my opinion, my preview, otherwise, if there is no change in the Russian administration, if there is no big change in the front lines, so we might see a Korean scenario. We have a demarcation line, no peace agreement, but no, how to say, no active military action. And I would also point to another action, because when it comes, obviously we have a change when it comes to Ukraine, that Ukraine is now has a candidate status for in terms of entering the EU. And I would point to the fact that, to the situation which we had last week when it came to the problem of Ukrainian grain in Poland, in Slovakia, in Hungary, in Romania, right, where we had this issue being discussed also among the Polish and Ukrainian presidents. So this is, how to say, these are de facto accession talks for Ukraine, because we see Ukraine, we see Poland, Hungary, Romania, etc. But many Western countries are also thinking like that. Many Western countries, I guess Spain, France, are fearful that Ukraine's entrance into the EU market would lead to a, if not a wipeout, but big complication for the agricultural sectors. These countries, Western countries, are in no rush and in no hurry to solve this issue, right? They are willing to keep, for this reason, Ukraine out of the European common market as far as possible, right? As long as possible. And here, I think the burden lies actually for such countries as Poland, as Lithuania, as Romania, or as Slovakia, as the Czech Republic, right? Who are interested for their security reasons to enter, for Ukraine to enter NATO, to enter the European Union. And they're also, and I think the burden lies in such formats as the Lublin Triangle, etc., to work out some kind of formula for this, for these kind of issues, right? How Ukraine's agricultural sector can be integrated into the European Union and satisfy everyone's interest, right? So that is that is the situation, right? So we have elections, we have deepening polarization, we might have cracks in unity, but on the other hand, we have an arrest warrant. And on the other hand, again, if we don't have de jure talks, right, de jure accession talks, this kind of issues around Ukrainian grain and other issues, I would call them de facto accession talks, because this is a question how Ukraine can function and can enter slowly into that European market. Okay, so I will pass the floor now to Iaroslav to maybe summarize a little bit what we've said, to react to what I have said, and then we'll have maybe a short Q&A session if it is possible.
Okay, thank you, Mariusz. I'll try to be short because as I see, we lack of time, so it's better to be very shortly. Partly we discussed a moment devoted to political process, to processes in Ukrainian society. From one side, my side, I want to add that when we're talking about political process in Ukraine nowadays, it's a little bit different between it was on June last year when we had meeting. Because last time we said that the political process is more dead than alive in Ukraine, and it's understandable because of war and Russian aggression. But nowadays we have it. Maybe it's not so active like it was before the 24th of February, but it exists in a latent form. From one side, when we talk, of course, all political parties try not to criticize each other, at least in the public sphere. because it's dangerous and no one wants to shake the Ukrainian society. Nowadays, friends, we have a lot of scandals devoted to corruption scandals in different ministry, also in the military ministry, etc. So nowadays, no one wants to shake more, additionally, Ukrainian society in a framework of Russian threat and Russian aggression. But from another side, it's not means that there are no political processes. There are. As I said, it's a latent and mostly exists in social media. Because nowadays, for example, before 24th of February, the main instrument to struggle between different groups of interest and different political parties were media. First of all, traditionally channels, TV media, and etc. Nowadays, because of marathon, there are no possibility to promote another point of view beside general state one. So media is the main arena and platform where people can share their own opinions, where political parties, not directly, sometimes indirectly with the help of experts, with public person, and etc., try to promote this or that ideas. And today, this social media is the main arena, even more. Maybe it's not traditionally for Europe, but Ukrainians try to use different platforms in this way. Not only Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, but also TikTok. For example, when we're talking about TikTok in Europe, it's first of all for young people. But in Ukraine, TikTok also an instrument of a political struggle between political parties. Of course, I believe that Ukrainian, because of some democratic tradition and other meanings, shows that after the war, we will see the stabilization of process when we can see a powerful opposition that criticize on public authorities and etc. and etc. Even more, I discussed with colleagues and they believe that after the end of the war, in 3 or 6 months, we can see that these numbers that different survey shows can definitely change. So in a very small period of time, only 3 or 6 months after the war. But of course, nowadays it's very difficult to talk about classic political process in Ukraine. But of course, even more, some political parties and political forces are preparing for election. As Yevhen said, no one knows when we will hold this election, because during martial law, we cannot hold it. But after it, I believe that we can hold it and different political parties start to prepare it. Even more, I hear the idea that there are ideas to hold next election with the help of different online platforms, to try to do it not traditionally, but with the help of different IT platforms. Whether it will be democratic, transparent, and etc., of course, it's a very difficult question. And of course, in the case of Ukrainian realities, we can imagine that there will be a great number of falsification in this case, but there are some ideas. And another point that I want to focus, it's another question devoted to decentralization. I also knew that you are interested in it, in this process. And of course, this process partly related to political process in Ukraine, even nowadays, and devoted to Ukrainian capability to struggle and countering Russian aggression. First of all, when we talking about decentralization, we must understand that it's really has played a very important role in countering Russian aggression, especially at the first stages. After all, decentralization, including the financial decentralization in 2020, enabled the local establishment to feel them very fluently and control the situation. Therefore, the risk of local authorities collaborating with aggressor were much lower after the 24th of February, because they feel themselves good in the situation that we have in Ukraine. Another point which also contributed to the clear pro-Ukrainian position, it also was that they get this decentralized resources. First of all, we are talking about finance one, that gave them a possibility to feel, as I said, fluently, and to try to build perspective for their own and for their own political projects. Secondly, with the help of centralization, they could preserve and they can save the benefits of decentralization only in the case if Ukraine was preserved. So it was like additional point why they need and why they want, I mean, when we're talking about local authorities to project and to defend Ukraine. So decentralization played like a very important role, like an instrument and catalyst for not only for national establishment, general one, but for local to protect their lands, to protect their cities from aggressors. Plus, decentralized budget helped them to deal with different projects and different activities which can help them during Russian aggression. In the first steps, it was very useful for them to use city budget to build different structures to protect their cities from invasion. So in this case, decentralization really play a great and effective role in countering Russian aggression. Another point that I want to focus on this issue is that during this process, firstly, the independence in using their budget was good, but nowadays they have a great problems with it. Nowadays, these budgets are fully empty because before 24th of February, the main income in a city budget was the taxes from people, more than 50%. Nowadays, when a great amount of people lose their work, of course, they cannot pay these taxes for budget. As a result, there are very small sum of money needed. But from another side, we have a great distractions in different cities. And of course, if we want to deal with the problem with the distraction, local authorities and municipal authorities must use and must finance how to deal with this problem. And because of it, nowadays they are very dependent on position of central authorities. And even more, we can look through during Lugano conference, and in a month we can see the conference in London devoted to the recovery process in Ukraine, that there are no answer how Western help, how Western funds will go to Ukraine, whether it will go to the central authorities and they will divide it between local and municipal authorities, or whether they go directly to municipal and local authorities. And it's very important because whether it will go partly decentralized, not only to the central authorities, it will help local authorities to stand on their legs and feel more fluently. Because whether there will be funds only to the central budget and after it will divide between different local authorities and between different cities, it means that all local establishment and local authorities will be totally depend on position of central authorities. And of course, it's not the best way to build a democratic society. But as I said, this question is open, and I believe that nearest time, at least in London during this conference, they will discuss this question too. Because as I remember, this conference will be devoted to investments, first of all, private investment to Ukraine. And of course, it's nearly related with the question of decentralization in Ukraine. Thanks, Mariusz.
Okay, thank you, Iaroslav. So I see we have no questions on the Facebook, so I'll just ask one last question before we finish our live. So I mean, for anyone, maybe Yevhen or Olena, or yes, sorry. How come that this time decentralization has not led to anarchy, right? Because if you remember in 1920, 1919, we had Ukraine was also decentralized, but it kind of passed this threshold where it became too many Ukraines. We had 2 or 3 Ukraines, as far as I remember, and it, how to say, hindered its attempts to gain independence. So anyone who would like to add something to this.
Maybe a short remark, Mariusz. I think it's not the best way to compare that period of time and modern one, because when we're talking about decentralized Ukraine, we are talking about different duties and responsibilities of local and national authorities. In that case, when we're talking about on the beginning of the 20th century, it was another situation. They were not even decentralized. They were even, I don't know, federalized, something like this. It was almost separately different entity. It wasn't a common state. Nowadays, we are talking about common and unit state of Ukraine. Even more, different surveys show that Ukrainian ready to live in such circumstances, in circumstances of war, but to return all Ukrainian territories, even Crimea. Even 77, it seems, the last survey that I saw, 77% of Ukrainians believe that it's better to not to have a support from Western states, but to return all territories, plus Crimea too. So in this case, we are talking about different decentralized process. From one side, we are talking about politician one, about different duties and responsibilities. And from another one, about federalized competence and different entities on the territory of modern Ukraine, which exist on the beginning of the 20th century. Thanks. Maybe someone want to add something.
Yeah, maybe someone just last word, some remark.
Some not academical remark or something like this. It's about the importance of this decentralization reform before war, like February in March, after invasion. I was in the little village near the Kiev, and I understand how it's important these like horizontal networks, and like what is like really decentralizations works when we want to defend us. And it's very, very important, not like in an academical way, but in real way. Then the like guys defend us, and it's not only words, it's about real life. And yes, it's what I want to remark of this.
Okay, great.
Maybe my short remark. I think that self-government for Ukrainian, it's belle époque. It's a remember of belle époque about Cossacks times, about self-government in Magdeburg law, and it's a basic of our contemporary development. Without self-government, we cannot create and rebuild successful Ukraine in closer future. And I think that our compass is to be in European rules, because if we rebuilding Ukraine without European rules, we cannot quickly be a member of EU. Today, I am a skeptic about our fast run to NATO and European Union, because contemporary leaders of European countries are not ready to vote about Ukraine as a member of NATO and the European Union. But in our case, the process is all, and result is nothing. We must make process of our creation of our activity in this area.
But sorry,
Yes.
Ukraine like show that this one is works. This rule is works, like human resource, social networks, horizontal back networks is works. It's like good like case. But we are successful in this one. And because of this, maybe it's like a good idea to like this for European society. It's works. It's good ideas to have this.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that note, I will end our live event. So maybe, hopefully,